And coming up on this week's Green Signals, your podcast, Flying Scotsman Crash Report. The Rail Accident Investigation Branch releases its findings into last September's collision at the Strathspey Railway, which injured 2 people. We speak to recently retired HM Chief Inspector of Railways Ian Prosser, CBE, and I ask him for his views on West Coast Railways and the Jacobite steam train saga. And Britain's longest railway viaduct is completed as Richard witnesses the final concrete segment being put into place on HS2's phenomenal Colne Valley Viaduct. So, welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and as ever,
from me, Richard Bowker.
Another week, another train discussion, eh, Richard?
It certainly is.
They go by increasingly quickly, and it's not just because we're getting old. First of all,
excuse me, speak for yourself. But anyway, sorry.
You're catching.
Carry on.
You're catching me up. First of all, thank you to everyone who has left us a super thanks on YouTube this week, and you are Chris Fribbins. And I see you've got the man trap in early for me, Richard, with this next one. Norfolk and Good. Guy B, Martin Sloman, Chris Exley, John Samson Snell, Robert Black, Neil Bennett, Alan Kirkman, the Independent Brigline Rail Group, heroes every week they are, Davey Bell. We really do appreciate so many of you leaving us super thanks, so thank you very much indeed from all 3 of us.
Thank you very much indeed, yes. And thank you to our new gold and silver members who have joined us, and they are Joe Gray, Gavin Quo, Joe's Trains, Jeff Simmons, David Morris, Emma Copeland, Peter Wren, Will Tucker, Richard White, Trevor Price, Celtic Boy 81, James Jeffries, and John Samson Snell. And you can see all our members, to whom we're very grateful, in the end credits of the show, including those who've joined as bronze members as well. Something else to mention, Nigel, we didn't do it last week, but we've not done an update on worldwide listeners for a couple of weeks. One of the reasons is we get now so many comments. Honestly, it's just going through and finding them and spotting them. So if we've missed you out and you are listening from around the world, apologies if we've not said it. But what would be really helpful from now, if you are listening from somewhere around the world, if you just drop us a quick email to info@greensignals.org, it means we won't miss it, and it means we can make sure we can give you a shout out from wherever on the planet you're listening. So thanks for that, and apologies if we've missed you out in the last couple of weeks.
And we do want to do that. If we've got a listener or a viewer in Tierra del Fuego or wherever, we want to know about it and talk about it, don't we? So please,
we certainly do.
Please,
especially if it say that again. Tierra what?
Tierra del Fuego.
Very good.
It's a southern tip of South America, as I know you know.
Yeah, I'm glad you amplified that, but no, that was fine. Yeah.
I think it means land of fire, doesn't it? We have a very special celebration this week, of course, because this, and I nearly did a fanfare then and stopped myself, is our 50th episode. I can't believe it, Richard. Not our 50th video, by the way, because we've done quite a few specials and extras, but it is our 50th magazine show since Richard and I sat in his lounge in Derbyshire to do the first show. I'm not going to looking at it because I think I'd wince a bit now.
It's a really interesting point that I have looked at a couple, because one of the ones I wanted to look at to work out what we'd said on a particular thing. And I looked at it and went, oh, we have come on quite a long way, which is great. We've got, hopefully, we've got better kit and we've got better at it and a bit more experienced. But 50, can you believe it?
I know. And it'll be 100 before you can
oh, no, please don't wish it away.
No, I'm not wishing it away. It's just going to happen.
What's been your favourite one?
Oh, it's a bit like people often ask me what my favourite locomotive is to drive, and I say the one I'm on at the time. It's really hard because we've had some classics, haven't we? It was great with Andrew McNaughton on HS2. They've all. What about you? You caught me on the hop there.
Well,
I wasn't expecting you to ask me that.
I love the ones. Well, I love the one with Mick Whelan.
Yes, he's always a good interviewer, is Mick.
Yeah, he just went, and it was terrific. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the one with Hugh Merriman. I mean, at the other end of the scale, because I thought he was
in the DFT.
Yeah, very straightforward, and he's a good guy anyway. I suppose it's true, isn't it? They've all been good in their own way. I've loved all me jollies.
I'm glad you're referring to them as such now, because they bloody are.
No, they're not. They're not really. They're jolly hard work. There's that word again. But no, it's been tremendous fun, and we've got lots of people listening in, and hope that they feel that it's as exciting and as interesting as ever.
And the fact that the membership scheme came from the people out there, Steph and you came up with that because we were getting these super thanks, when we saying, well, why don't we try and give them something for the money that they're giving us? And
no, absolutely,
it came from that. But the thing I found incredibly touching and very encouraging is just the response from people who like what we're doing. Yeah, there's that bloke who said, I can't stand this, and there's always a few of them. But when we've been out and about to places, being stopped in the street, like your moment in Devizes, Asda or Sainsbury's, no, Waitrose it would be, being you, wouldn't it? It'd be
no,
you.
It was Sainsbury's. Honestly, flipping heck. By the way, other brands are available, but it was...
But being collared by the bloke as you bent over to get the frozen peas out. Hello, are you Richard Bowker?
Yeah, but he was lovely.
Yeah.
And it is so nice that... and, we what is great, as you say, it's the fact that we are, bringing people a bit, they're enjoying it, and that's why we did it. We didn't just do it for ourselves, and it's great.
I was back in Burnley a couple of weeks ago sorting out some problems on my narrowboat, which is at a marina up there at the moment.
Hey, that's a phrase, isn't it? I mean, that's not a phrase you hear in everyday
sorting
language.
Out my narrowboat.
I was back up in Burnley sorting out a problem with my narrowboat.
Well, there you go.
I mean,
but there's a little steam railway, 7.25 inch gauge, in Thompson Park, which is a couple of miles away. So I went to have a look, and I was chatting with the half dozen guys who were really lovely little railway. If you're in that part of the world, go and see them at Thompson Park. And just chatting with the volunteers there. And one of them suddenly looked at me and he said, "You're not Nigel Harris, are you?" I said, "I'm afraid so. I don't know your money, do I?" Which is a stock response. No, he says, it's just, I love green signals. He said, it's just absolutely brilliant. And it's just really, you sort of walk away with a smile on your face. So thank you all of you out there who are telling us that you like what we do, because we like what we do as well. And it's good to know that it's landing, as they say, isn't it?
And you know what the best thing is, Nigel?
There's lots more to come.
Yeah, it's what we've got planned. And I suppose if you think the last 12 months has been great, wait till you see the next 3, 6, and so on. Yeah, we got loads of stuff planned, and I think I hope people are going to really enjoy it. Right,
on to something venerable and much loved. And no, I'm not talking about you or me, Richard, but world-famous A3 Pacific Flying Scotsman, built in 1923. The locomotive has become the most famous steam locomotive in the world, and it attracts enormous crowds wherever it goes, sometimes on the tracks where we don't want them. Controversy is rarely far away, excuse me, and once again, it's in the news for all the wrong reasons this week, with a publication of the Rail Accident Investigation Branch report into the collision that took place between Scotsman and the luxurious Royal Scotsman stock on the Strathspey Railway in Aviemore on September the 29th, 2023. So very nearly a year ago. Basically, whilst running tender first, ready to couple onto the coaches of the Royal Scotsman for a trip down the Strathspey Railway to Botergarten, a collision took place at around 7 miles per hour. Very serious when you've got 160 tons or so of locomotive. It occurred, says RAIB, because the driver was not aware of the proximity of Flying Scotsman to the coaches, and so did not control its speed accordingly. 2 people in the coaches were taken to hospital after the collision, but they weren't seriously injured, thank goodness, and they were not detained. The collision also caused minor damage to the locomotive tender and damage to the coaches, which were taken out of service. Caused chaos in the train as well. Richard, I always admire your forensic approach. You've read the report in detail. What does RAIB say happened? And crucially, what's likely to be the consequences?
Yeah, it's not a particularly long report, this. I think it's sort of sub 40-page job.
39 pages, spot on.
Yeah. And it's important to remember what RAIB say their remit is, which isn't to apportion blame. They don't have prosecuting powers. What they're trying to do is say, these are the lessons learned so we can help avoid these things happening again. So that's their kind of remit.
Fair enough.
Yeah. They say there were several causal factors, things that led to this happening. And they identified three big things. Number one, that during the movement of Flying Scotsman, the driver's visibility of the coaches was limited because the track's on a curve, right? And he was on the outside of the curve, right?
So looking down the side of that huge tender.
Looking down the side of that tender, so couldn't see the curve in the track. So that was number one. Number two, immediately before the collision, nobody in the cab warned him that the locomotive Flying Scotsman was getting very close to the Royal Scotsman coaches, right? And I'll come back to that in a second, because the third one was the driver, it is said, actually had an expectation that the coaches were further back. And the reason for that is, although on many, many occasions they do this, on this occasion, a Class 37 diesel locomotive was on the back end of the coaches, and in order to clear the points, the whole rake of coaches had been sort of kind of shifted forward, so he was closer to them than he expected to be normally, right?
And by quite a bit, we're talking about 2 carriage lengths or thereabouts.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of space. So those were the three big causal factors. Now, that one about nobody warning him before the collision, they actually broke that down into a number of sub-points, and they said that they think that took place because, number one, there was ambiguity about the roles of everybody in the cab. Second, that the location of what's called, they call it the custodian's representative, but kind of think of this as the owner's rep. The loco is owned by the National Railway Museum, and it's sort of lent out. That's probably the best way of putting it. So the owner's rep was sat in the fireman's seat, okay, and therefore had the best view of those coaches because he was looking down on the inside of the curve, okay? And everybody seemed to think that he was looking out and would shout when something, if they got close. Well, he didn't think that was his role. Now, he did shout, but it turned out to be a bit too late. There were some freight wagons that were on the driver's side, and that also added to obscuring the curve because of the curve. And fourth, there was no briefing or plan for this particular movement. And actually for the visit of Flying Scotsman, sort of generally, there were some inadequacies there. So those were the things that they felt led to sort of confusion on the cab. And taken together, they said those are the causal factors. That is why it happened.
I do raise an eyebrow a bit at the portrayal of the driver as a bit of a passive machine operator rather than the driver, but let's leave that for now. Rabe also observed that at the time of the collision, there were 6 people in the cab, Richard, which is in direct contravention of the Strathspey Railway Company's own rules, which stipulates a maximum of 4 people. And although Rabe say there was no evidence of distraction of the operational crew through unnecessary conversations, I can tell you, if you've got 6 people in the cab, their very presence is a distraction. Full stop. But I've just got 3 or 4 sort of bullet points in my mind which are going round, which I would like to resolve. I don't understand why there was an assumption that the carriages were further away than they are if the job is being done right. The assumption that the owner's rep in the fireman's seat was carrying out a proper observational role, that was just assumed. I do think it was a mistake not to ask 2 of the people to get off. The rule is quite clear, and especially as one of the senior Strathspey managers was one of them, maybe I don't understand why he didn't call it out and say, I'm getting off and I'm taking somebody with me. Those things are really, really important.
But isn't there there's a very powerful operative word that you used there, assumption. There were lots of assumptions that took place here. And surely, I mean, how long have you been driving steam locomotives on
Well,
heritage railways? I mean, when did you last assume anything?
You can't assume anything, Richard. There's the old saying of, assume makes an ass of you and me, and it does. And it opens the door to Mr. Cockup, as this case, clearly shows. Mistakes were made. And look, you don't need to take my word for it. The section 2.2.2 of the SRC rulebook says that the driver must observe all signals and speed restrictions and keep a good lookout at all times. He's responsible for the safe and proper working of the train. But somewhere I'm trying not to use a charged word like melee or hubbub of 6 people in the cab. These things were lost and assumptions were made. RAIB is critical of the Strathspey Railway Company. It says there was ineffective management of the visit, and clearly that is obviously the case. But I'd be curious as to why there's no mention or real looking at any operational mistakes which may have followed, because surely we should say that too, not to apportion blame, but to properly, truly and objectively and candidly fully explain what happened here.
It's an interesting point there, isn't it? Because I read that report and I can see why there were lots of comments about the almost like the context, the generality. I mean, they talk about, some challenging issues at the railway in the previous few months, and they may not be relevant, the lack of planning and so on and so forth. I think what you're talking about, without wanting to put words in your mouth, you're saying, yeah, all very interesting, but in that cab at that time, certain things were done in a way that, well, there's no better way of putting it. You wouldn't have done. Yeah. And so it's not that the RAB report is talking about stuff that's not relevant. It's just that there's that bit of what happened in that cab.
I mean, I'll give you one thing which I wouldn't have done. I would not have let the owner's rep sit in the fireman's seat when I'm on the outside of a curve approaching a train. I'd have politely asked him to get up so that my fireman could sit there, who knows the station, knows the characteristics of the railway, and could have talked me onto the carriages, if you like. I certainly wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have had 6 people in the cab. I would have politely or firmly asked 2 to depart. So if mistakes were made, let's be honest about it, not for blame or to point the finger at anyone, but to say, look, this really wasn't a great idea and let's not do it again.
No.
It's a timely reminder, Richard, if any was ever needed, that the operational and safety procedures required on a heritage railway are just as important to implement as they are on the mainline network. Thomas will still kill you, These are not toys. They're big, serious, potentially dangerous machines, and we need to run them properly. So, after publication of the report and its communication doubtless earlier to the Strathspey Railway, they have made some operational changes to address effective management of big visitors like Flying Scotsman. And that has got to be a good thing. Maybe both the railway and RAIB, actually, might just like to reflect that the driver isn't a passive machine operator. I've heard it said that the driver is God, and the slightly more humorous way of putting it is the driver might not always be right, but he is always the driver. Yeah. That's really important. So let's stick with safety and move on to a different aspect. I had the pleasurable opportunity recently to chat with a very old friend, Ian Prosser, CBE, the recently retired Chief Inspector of Railways. Ian is always measured and calm with what he has to say, exactly the traits one needs in such a pivotal role, and his insight and comment is always worth listening to, as it is here. And yes, I did ask Ian for his views on the West Coast Railways and his ongoing saga with their use of Mark 1s and central door locking.
Ian Prosser, CBE. It's a pleasure to have you on Green Signals. Recently retired as Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Railways, which I much prefer as a title to the ORR's Director of Safety or whatever. Just a sort of real personal question to kick us off. You were only the 25th person to occupy a role, if not created by Stevenson himself, then specified by him in his famous letter of 1840. That must have been a heck of a feeling.
It is, and it's a great honour to actually have held the role for nearly 16 years. And the fact that the HMRI, the Railway Inspector, has been going since 1840, second longest organisation in the railways, and is still going strong, and has a very important part.
I mean, I don't mean this to sound as trite as I know it's going to, but did you sort of feel the weight of history of all those portraits of those bearded men of the 19th century who went before you making recommendations after big accidents?
I think somebody asked me the same sort of question. I don't think there was so much trepidation, but it was a great feeling of having to keep the tradition going, but also to be there to make sure the railway moved forward and be that sort of long-serving organisation that doesn't chop and change a lot, but actually takes the industry forward on an ongoing basis.
And that's the key thing, isn't it? I mean, if you read your excellent book by you and David Key, one of the things that struck me when we were all putting it together was things like wooden carriages and gas bottles. It went on for decades with inspectors recommending stuff that just wasn't done. And I'm sure that's something that may resonate with you.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the history of the railways, has been a slow to change. And must say, you played a very important part editing the book. And I think it's a good read, very good read. And it does show that sort of tendency not to move fast enough. Or anything like fast enough, and we still struggle with some of that today. But that's why it's so important that I felt in going into that role, it was to show leadership, not just be a regulator, but show leadership to the industry.
And there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
Looking back, I mean, how would you sum up the successes and what didn't go as well as you wanted it to? What were they? I hesitate to use the word failures, Ian, but
there's. I think, some of the successes were the fact that on a high-level basis, I set out with this vision of zero industry-caused fatalities and ever reducing risk. And that initially I got some criticism in some parts from people saying it was gold-plated, that sort of thing. But we countered that, and people accepted it. And setting the goal of excellence in health and safety management and the creation of RM3 from a regulatory point of view.
RM3?
Risk Management Maturity Model. So, an acronym. But so I think that led to, it's also led to a team where you can come in at the bottom from school even and become chief inspector. So we've got a structure of career development, which I think has been put in place, which is really important. So I think that's a real success. And the gender split, we're now 50-50. Diversity has been in
what, across the whole industry?
No, across.
Across all right.
I think some of the other areas of achievement have been the complete sea change in how we manage health in the sector. There's still a long way to go, but when I first came in to this role, I had about half a person working on health, and so did RSSB. And I think we've fundamentally changed the way that the sector looks at health management, because health is a bigger issue in many ways for people than safety.
Yet it doesn't catch the headlines to quite the same degree, does it?
No, it doesn't. And it's what they call safety on a long burn, or a slow burn. So, and people taking note of things like mental health. But we've seen safety culture improvements. There's still more to do, but the transformation in some areas like track worker safety has been very significant. My disappointment there is it took too long, and perhaps took us too long to make it happen.
And sadly, some fatalities.
Yes. So that was a disappointment in some ways. But also the other thing I think I saw improvements was is at the board level. I think being in the role for 16 years, I saw an improvement in how boards, safety committees have addressed the leadership issues around safety improvement. And
How did that change? I mean, maybe it became a bit less of a box-ticking exercise and a more actively managed thing.
yes, everyone and directors and non-executive directors are very much engaged with the executive team in making suggestions and changes and pushing people along. They're very supportive of the track worker safety program in Network Rail, Mike Putnam in particular, and Peter Hendy. So this engagement at very senior level in the issues has, I think, really improved. And some of the individuals involved have made a real difference. The other areas that I'm pretty pleased with, if you like, which is some of the suicide prevention stuff that's been done in the sector, with the collaboration that's happened there, and with the Samaritans and across the sector, is a really tragic issue that the industry has to deal with.
Well, of course, there's very often, sadly, one or two a day, isn't there, somewhere on the network?
And the work that's been done to train staff to make early interventions has been phenomenal, and we've had a lot more fatalities if that hadn't been done. Light rail as well, following a real disappointment. And was this obviously in my tenure? There's been 2 serious incidents in terms of fatalities. One was Sandylands and one was Carmont.
So that was Croydon, and then in Scotland on the main line. Yeah.
But after the raid report, they're putting in place a light rail safety standards board, which we facilitated and have guided them through. It's now really starting to show real benefits and improvements, and getting much greater collaboration across that sector. But there wasn't very much before that.
Well, I suppose it was quite a new sector, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they're really buses on rail wheels, so the way they're regulated was all a bit different, wasn't it?
Well, it was because I think there were very disparate systems, run or owned in many cases by local authorities. So, getting collaboration was more difficult. Obviously, there's more stringent or some more difficult things around finances and stuff like that. But it's really started to really show him real improvements.
So improvement in trams. What about Carmont? Because that really put climate change and the impact on the network to in a very sharp focus, didn't it?
Yeah, and we had already been encouraging and pushing, and you'll see it from some of our annual reports, Network Rail, to get on with dealing with this phenomenon that was going to impact on the infrastructure. But sadly, Carmont brought that really into sharp focus. Network Rail has made some real efforts in terms of managing, mitigating risk and understanding their assets a lot better. But what it did really also focus in on was the fact that drainage had been
neglected for a long time.
Yeah, for a very long time.
Because it was very easy, wasn't it, for civil engineering managers? It was literally unseen. So you could cut budgets there and nobody would notice until the climate change impact came along.
And it had been a Cinderella asset, but now there's been real improvements in terms of asset knowledge. We increased the amount of resource. Well, it's not huge amounts of resource, but an expertise needed. But it had been for many years, and it goes back before privatisation, Cinderella asset.
And we've had 1 or 2 near misses, haven't we, at Watford and various places. Clear warnings that there's an issue.
And that's what
are you happy with the focus on Victorian infrastructure in the 21st century now?
Yes, I think the asset knowledge, and particularly things like drainage, is significantly improved. One of the other successes is the fact that we have the safest track asset that we've ever had. So all the work that was done after...
The safest track we've ever had?
Yeah. All the work that was done post-Grey Rig and post-Potter's Bar, with the new stretcher bars, for example, redesigned stretcher bars, the measurement trains, the infrastructure monitoring that goes on, that's been a real improvement over the 16 years I was in the role. So that was something I thought was really good and very proud of. One of the other things I think was a success story, although it cost more and it took longer, which was almost inevitable, was Crossrail. And we put a lot of effort, small team, working with the team in Crossrail to get that over the line. Very complex system, but this is fundamentally a superb piece of railway.
And it's really paying dividends now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And people always moan at the time, well, it's costing a bit more. but you know, Brunel spent twice as much to build this railway that he budgeted for. So, you know, and it took a bit longer, but it was incredibly complicated systems, particularly around the station. So that's an achievement. And the other area we have made progress, but there's more to do, is in the heritage sector.
I was just about to ask you that very question, because it's, I mean, the heritage sector started, what, a good 50 years ago, using equipment which somebody else had already thrown away as scrap. What's your feelings on the heritage sector?
Well, I think you know, we've tackled them to improve the professionalism of the leadership in the heritage sector. Still more to do. The Heritage Railway Association now has upped its game significantly from when I started.
Well, it's much more professional, isn't it, with Steve Oates in charge and people like Paul Lewin who are just exceptional.
It's a really different organisation from when I started, and it's engaging with their members. We engage heavily with them. You know, we go to their conferences, and I've spoken many times, and they do get. We even produced a heritage version of RM3, Risk Management and Maturity Model, for them to make it more proportionate for their
tool for them to do the thing. Yeah,
and we had very good attendance at a number of workshops that we ran for them. So the whole area seems to be much more professional.
I mean, I know from my own experience that the heritage sector is very aware. You know, you often hear HMRI this and HMRI. They are acutely aware that they are being watched, and they've got some very stringent, which is a great thing, you know, and hopefully that is reflected in the good safety record of the heritage sector up to now.
Yes, and I think, you know, credit goes to some of my inspectors who have engaged with them in a very effective way over the years. And that's part of what I think is really important about the inspector. It's not just being a regulator and using the big stick when you need to. It is actually encouraging and making them making the change.
Helping along the way, so that they're not needed in their official capacity, which is most worried about. Other aspects of heritage railway, central door locking. We need to talk about that. This has been rumbling on for a long time now on the West Highland Railway with West Coast. They first came to prominence with you, I guess, and with me and everybody else, with that dreadful spad at Wootton Bassett in 2015, where a number of people, and I say I was one of them, thought that they would be removed from the railway at that point. You didn't. You worked very closely with them, and you put in a lot of effort to help them improve. And yet here we are, all these years later, nearly a decade later, with another big issue rumbling on. Are you disappointed about where we are?
Well, I am disappointed where we are with West Coast Railways, and talk a bit more about the CDL issue with them. But I think the other point was after Wootton Bassett, we did take action. You know, they were prosecuted, and we did shut them down for a while those improvements were made. But we and others, they brought some help in, really made some really important changes to the driver management structure and systems that they operated, and fatigue management as well. So I really could not quite I was really disappointed about the CDL conversations, because we were very upfront about wanting the...
Well, you've always been very clear, and lack of clarity is not an issue.
You know, we were very clear what we wanted. The rest of this part of this is small, obviously, heritage railways on the main line, a small element of the sector, but everyone else responded in a positive way. And then we had this long, protracted battle with West Coast Railways about doing it, when we demonstrated through our consultation, we went through proper processes, that this was a reasonably practical thing to do, and it's good business to do it. It's
not complicated.
No.
Not excessively expensive.
But there we had someone who just wanted to dig their heels in, and very sadly, but what I was really clear with, and so was my board, was that it was really important that we, what I call, win the war rather than win individual battles. And that, to me, the judicial review success demonstrated how right we were and how well we...
Well, there were 5 findings that were, you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of them, would you? You know,
No.
The judge was absolutely clear.
And I think the team, my team and our legal team, with our support from council, did a first-rate submission and work. And it just demonstrated that if you do it properly, and this, why they're still having difficulties, I do not know.
And yet the regulation is absolutely clear, isn't it? A Mark 1 shall not be allowed on the network unless it has either an exemption or CDL. So why is it still happening?
Well, I think they're using the fact that, that they're not carrying, that allegedly not carrying passengers in those vehicles, which the regulations sort of allow an exemption for. But the thing I think that's important is that, and I've not been there for a few months now, but is the fact that they have to have a decent, proper application for an exemption that is the same as everyone else's. Because we cannot be, everyone has done theirs, so they know what to do, and they still seem to be struggling to be able to do it.
So should there not be an inspector on every train?
I think the idea was that we would be doing, as we did previously, sort of unannounced visits on that railway to actually see what's going on.
And the impression you get is that you just use the words digging the heels in and dragging the heels as well. Are they hoping that in the end you'll just go away and give up? Because as I understand it, they were given the ORR's view 3 months ago, and we're waiting for a West Coast response. Meanwhile, the trains continue to run with Mark 1s. There's been no response. It's starting to make ORR look a bit weak.
I don't think so. I think it's just disappointing that such an organisation just doesn't seem to want to listen to anyone.
So we just wait to see now what ORR does. I mean, your successor, Richard Hines, is in place. I think the waiting world that wants everybody to abide by the same rules is looking to ORR to say, look, enough, one way or the other, and we wait to see whether that happens.
And I'm really pleased that Richard got the job. He worked with me for 3.5 years. He's an excellent inspector, an excellent engineer, and I think he's going to do a really good job. And it's now, the thing that I'm pleased that's starting to get some traction, not just with ORR, is the fact that we've got rail reform actually seems to be happening.
What next for you? You're still a young chap with all that experience and knowledge, which I'm sure is in great demand. Are you consulting now?
Well, I have to wait for 6 months before I can advise a UK business. However, I'm doing starting to do the sort of things I enjoy, which one of them is I've become an associate of Kelvin Topset, which is an investigation company that also does a lot of training with its own system.
Okay.
And I've known these people for a very, very long time, in fact, 36 years. So, and I've been out with using them as the sort of overarching company to Chile recently to help them with their...
Oh, that head-on collision.
Yes. And took one of our colleagues in Topset Associate, who actually a very long-standing colleague because we were both at ICI together.
Okay.
So, no, there's other things in the pipeline.
Which we shall doubtless chat about in due course. But Ian Prosser, thanks for, is it 16 years you did as...
nearly 16 years.
As Chief Inspector. Thanks for 16 years of hard work for the industry there, and personally a very great friendship with me, which I've always appreciated, which will continue.
Will do.
And Green Signals wishes you all the best in the future, and please tell us what you're up to.
Will do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nigel, and thanks for your support over the years.
A pleasure.
Okay, on to something truly uplifting now, and the completion of the longest railway viaduct in Britain. Up until last week, that I know
it's quite sad, really, isn't it? They'll have to
it's
reprint.
Remarkable.
They'll have to reprint the Guinness Book of Records, won't they?
Well, until last week, the record for the longest railway viaduct in Britain was held by the Tay Bridge, obviously the new Tay Bridge, which was, or still is, 2 miles and 73 yards, or 3,286 meters long. Interestingly, did you know that it can vary in its length by as much as 1.14 meters due to thermal expansion and contraction?
I didn't, but I'm fascinated by that sort of stuff. And as a related but irrelevant addendum, I remember reading years ago that at supersonic speed, Concorde was 11 inches longer than it is on the ground. And I was thinking, how the hell did they keep paint on it?
interesting question. Right.
Sorry
anyway,
to interrupt. Do go back to the Colne
Thank you
Valley
very much.
Viaduct.
Well, because it's all very fascinating about the Tay Bridge, but it is no longer the longest railway viaduct in Britain, because there's a new kid on the block, and it's the Colne Valley Viaduct on HS2, which is near Denham, sort of on the northwest of London. It's now become completed with the insertion of the very last of, I think, it was 1,000 segments, and they precast a few of them in situ as well. But at 3.4 kilometres, it obviously now sets the record. So I went along. I was invited along to the ceremony to celebrate the insertion of the final segment and enjoy and share with everybody this magnificent achievement. It's Thursday, the 5th of September, 2024, and my destination for the day is HS2's Colne Valley Viaduct. The weather is autumnal. Indeed, it's rather grim. It's wet and a bit windy as we arrive at the Align JV headquarters near Denham. And so it's quickly into the induction centre for a safety briefing, together with a chance to marvel at some rather impressive models, before jumping on a minibus for the short ride to the site. There's something of a festival atmosphere when we reach the location for the event to mark the lowering of the final segment, as the various media outlets watch on carrying out filming and interviewing duties. Loud music is heard on a rather impressive PA system. The aroma of burgers, hot dogs and onions all being cooked for the dozens of proud workers, all here to see the event, rather assaults the senses at 10 o'clock in the morning, but there's no shortage of customers. So I'm here at the Colne Valley Viaduct site for HS2 at the lowering of the final segment on the entire viaduct. You can see it behind me, the rig that carries the segment into place is just currently moving. The Colne Valley Viaduct's construction is being managed by the main works contractor Align JV. It's a team consisting of Bouygues Travaux Publics, Sir Robert McAlpine and Volker Fitzpatrick. It is one of 500 bridging structures on the HS2 project. Building work on the viaduct's deck began in May 2022. Since then, a dedicated team of highly skilled engineers have used this massive launching girder to lower into place the bridge's 1,000 uniquely shaped deck segments. Edging forward from north to south, the 160-metre-long launching girder used a balanced cantilever method to lower deck segments into place to form half an arch either side of a pier, before moving to the next pier to complete the arch span by repeating the process. I spoke with Billy Alawulia, Senior Project Manager for the viaduct at HS2 Limited, to hear about the construction of the viaduct itself and also what it meant to him and the team to have reached this important milestone. Billy, this must be a fantastic day for you. I mean, you've been working on this project for how long here?
So I've been working on HS2 for 9 years, getting ready for the project into delivery mode.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an absolutely very proud moment for me to be here today to put the last segment on Colne Valley Viaduct deck.
And how many segments in total?
So we precasted 1,000 segments in a factory that we built on site.
Yeah.
In addition to those 1,000 precast segments, we casted 22 in situ. So
right.
In total, 1,022 segments make up the 2-mile viaduct.
And the reason for the ones in situ, is that because they're more technically complex? They had to be specially made?
So the design has considered the use of a girder under best value.
Yeah.
And this girder was not able to put heavy precast segments, the ones that we have had to do cast in situ. So yes, they were technically challenging, but we've got very professional, skilled people to deal with those technical challenges. However, we also need to make sure that it's not at any cost. Therefore, it has to be at value for money as well.
Of course. And so once this segment's gone in today, what happens? How long before the viaduct is effectively finished? Presumably there's still work to do.
There is still quite a lot of work to be done to complete the viaduct on top of the deck itself.
Yeah.
So it will take us till about late spring next year to finish work that we need to do on top of the viaduct
Yeah.
and get it ready probably by about late autumn to hand over to railway systems for them to come and put track and systems, overhead power lines, signaling, and then get it ready for the railway to.
And you yourself, are you onto the next project, or are you going to see this one through?
We look forward to what we do. My focus at the moment is to get this finished, get it ready, hand it over to our railway systems successfully. And that's where my focus is currently.
Final question. How many people involved on this particular site then? What's the total
So
team?
on this contract, we've employed upwards of 3,000 people.
Wow.
And this contract, as you know, includes this 2-mile long viaduct.
Yeah.
It includes twin boat tunnels, which are 10-mile long. We've got 5 shafts on that tunnel and a little bit of open route as well.
Fantastic.
So in total, about 3,000 people that we've employed.
Superb. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're getting pretty close to the point at which the final segment's going to be lowered now. It's been positioned. It had to be turned round in order to fit through the gantry itself, the actual delivery rig. So it's now in the right position, and shortly it will be lowered into place.
Welcome to this event to celebrate the last segment being put in place, the 3.4 Colne Valley Viaduct. Fantastic.
Soon it was time for the lowering of the final segment to the rather dramatic strains of Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Fanfare for the Common Man. The viaduct's completion means that the 3.3 kilometre Tay Bridge, linking Fife and Dundee, has finally ceded the crown of being Britain's longest rail bridge to HS2, a record the Tay Bridge had held since 1887. The gently curved 3.4 kilometre or 2.1 mile long structure on London's northwestern edge reaches across the beautiful Colne Valley near the M25 motorway and the village of Denham. It will carry high-speed trains running to and from the capital at speeds of up to 200 miles per hour. Once the main civil engineering phase of construction ends, the factory and the surrounding buildings will be removed, and the whole area between the viaduct and HS2's 10-mile tunnel beneath the Chiltern Hills just to the north will be transformed into an area of chalk, grassland and woodland as part of HS2's Green Corridor project. Well, there we go. The final segment is in place at the Colne Valley Viaduct from the launching girder at Dominique. It was a very sort of dramatic moment, really, and an incredibly poignant moment for all the men and women who've been working on this project for quite a number of years. Superbly done, a great event, and a sort of a real kind of milestone moment. So congratulations to everybody at HS2 for such a superb achievement, and here's to finishing off the rest of the line and getting high-speed trains running in Britain as soon as we possibly can.
It's only just longer though, isn't it, Richard, by a few
114 metres, I think, because I think Tay Bridge was 3.286 and this one's 3.4. So, I mean, it's imagine Usain Bolt running 100 metres and a little bit more, and that's the difference.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Fair enough. I thought it was less than that, and they'd maybe tweak the drawings to make sure they got the record.
Well, they may well have done that. I don't know.
But look, fascinating. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again because I think it warrants saying. In all the hubbub over HS2, we've kind of lost focus on the engineering excellence that's going on. And those guys and women have been doing a brilliant job for years on that huge structure. And it is an enormous moment for them to see a structure like that completed.
And not only that, the quality of what they've done. I mean, there'll be some idiot somewhere say, oh, well, obviously gold plated, but they've built it to last and they've built it to be functional for a long period of time, a long design life. But it looks absolutely stunning, and I just take my hat off to them. I think they've done an amazing job.
They did. The interview with the chap, the engineer, was fascinating to listen to. I mean, there was a man who was glowing with pride, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, and rightly so.
And absolutely rightly so. And they know how to organise a press, don't they? Anyone that comes up with cheeseburgers at 10 o'clock in the morning gets my vote.
But not a cheeseburger, mainly. No, it was great, and they obviously had a fantastic time. They were entirely within their rights to celebrate a bit.
Absolutely. So let us move on with this week's Railway News Roundup. Easy for me to say. And we start with a fantastic piece of news this week in that the Green Party has finally reversed its long-standing opposition to HS2. Green members at the party conference backed the change of position by a narrow margin in Manchester last week. I think it was 52 to 48. But means the party is now officially in support of building HS2 in full. Bit late, perhaps, but better late than never to the party. And all credit, I have to say, to the Greens for HS2 group, established as far back as 2011, who have absolutely not given up despite all sorts of pressure from their own party and from inside, and that they were somehow traitors to the Green cause. So well done for them for not giving up and finally getting it sorted. Though former Greens, now in the House of Lords, I noticed are still...
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
I was trying not to say a rude word then.
I think you said it. I think you said it by not saying it, right? But anyway, look, the good news is they've finally done it, and unbelievable, but fortunate anyway. Next, we have the fact that East Midlands Railway. This is another good news story, but there's a little twist to this. They've released some new photographs of the interior of their new Aurora bi-mode trains built by Hitachi, which actually Steph and I saw when we went up to
Newton Aycliffe.
Newton Aycliffe, and the paint finish is what I remember. It was absolutely magnificent. Just to remind people, it's £400 million of investment. They've got all sorts of stuff that are nice things. Bespoke glass in the windows that's been used to allow mobile phone signals to pass through easily without interruption. I'll tell you about the Faraday cage on a Pendolino one day, Nigel.
Okay.
But that's a really nice touch. So that's all great. They look superb. There is one little bit of a challenge that may be coming down the track, if you'll pardon my pun. And actually, one of our listeners did tip us off about this, that the overhead line equipment south of Bedford may not be in the state it needs to be to run at 125 miles an hour, or above 100 miles an hour anyway. So we asked Network Rail, who had, I've got to say, fair play. They're very straight up and said, yep, this is the position. And they said, yeah, it is true that the overhead line between London and Bedford was installed in the 1970s, and it is only rated to 100 miles an hour. So they have a program to sort that out, which they say will be completed by September 2025, and that's what they hope to do, so in a year's time. But I suspect that means that either the Auroras, when they come into service, will either have to run diesel to Bedford, or they'll have to run at 100 miles an hour, and that'll have an impact on sectional running times in the timetable. We're just trying to just absolutely bottom that out. It's a bit of a nuisance, really, isn't it?
What you mean is that if it runs on diesel, that's be necessary to run at 125. Otherwise, it can't do that.
It cannot run above 100 miles an hour on electric until the overhead has been rated.
But it can on diesel.
I believe so. Yeah.
How mad is that?
It's just a bit embarrassing, isn't it, really? But, it doesn't take anything away from the new trains. They're fantastic. No. But yeah, maybe a more, let's hope that this is the kind of stuff in the future that will get resolved more quickly.
Excellent. We'll look forward to that. And repairs are underway at the 180-year-old Grade 2 listed Ouse Valley Viaduct in Sussex. Almost 17 million passenger journeys are made across the structure every year. That's around 52,000 journeys every weekday, 20 passenger trains plus a handful of freight trains every hour. But it was opened in 1841 and needs restoration and repairs to some of the stone and brickwork to ensure it stays safe and reliable in the years to come. How surprised the engineers and builders would be to see that the trains they built it for and the trains that's actually using it. Incredibly, it was originally built using 11 million bricks. How do they know? The viaduct stands at 29 metres tall, has 37 arches, and stretched 450 metres across the Ouse Valley and over the River Ouse. And you will notice at no time did I mention Olympic-sized swimming pools.
No, that was very good. When I was a kid, that was one of my favourite words, though. And ooze, the River Ouse. I know.
It's one of those words you can get a lot of meaning into. Ooze.
What's is it? Onomatopoeia? I can't remember. Anyway, it's brilliant. It's a great word. Right. I like this story. This was really good. TransPennine Express has welcomed 21 customer ambassadors to its stations. The role was originally a temporary one while improvement work was taking place, but the ambassadors have proved so popular with customers that TransPennine have decided to make them permanent. They wear purple high-vis jackets, so they stand out at stations on the operator's network, and they're purely there to help people, whether it's finding the train or the correct platform, keeping people safe by reminding them to stand behind the yellow line. I hope that's not too... Yeah, anyway, it's good. Helping with luggage, and they're there to help. It's great. It's really good, and I think more customer-facing people on platforms and stations is a good thing. So well done, TPE.
Heated agreement from me. And that's the end of the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send us any snippets of little or big stories from where you are or anywhere, if you think we might not have been aware of it, and we do miss things from time to time. We can't promise to read them all out. The best ones we will, and we'll name check wherever we do read out an email that's been sent to us. And with that, we shall segue with intense pleasure and no small amount of anticipation to
the quiz.
Yay!
Yes, your build-ups are getting ever more dramatic, it has to be said. Anyway, I thought last week's quiz question was going to be relatively straightforward, but of course, it hasn't stopped plenty of people coming up with admittedly some very creative answers. The question, just to remind everybody, was this: where on the GB rail network can you find two adjacent stations where to travel between them by road would take around 10 times longer than travelling by rail? Now, we did have a lot of answers to this. There were a couple that I was pretty confident in, and sure enough, they're there, but people came up with some others. So the allowable answers, and that's, I say allowable because around 10 times longer is a little bit subjective. So we've been a bit flexible. Yeah. So number one, which many people said, Culraine to Invershin on the far north line, two stations pretty much at opposite ends of a viaduct. 1 minute by train, around 17 minutes by car. Depends on, sometimes takes 2 minutes, hence the reason why we said about 10 times. Then we had Morpher Mothac to Barmouth on the Cambrian coastline. So that was a good one. Carreur to Rannoch on the West Highland line is okay because although Carreur is accessible only by a private road, we didn't say whether it was public or private. It was just a road. So that's fine. These were the clever ones. Woolwich to Custom House on the Elizabeth line. It's 4 minutes on the Elizabeth line. And according to Google Maps, when I did the check, 36 minutes by road. So that is about 10 times. So well done to Jeremy Ricketts for spotting that one. Sticking with the London theme, Wapping to Rotherhithe. That was a brilliant one. 2 minutes by train, 20 minutes when I checked. So well done if you said Wapping to Rotherhithe. A few people said Bear Alston to Culstock on the Gunners Lake branch, but Google Maps said 20 minutes and the train takes 7 minutes, so that's not right. Couldn't let that one get through. And some very enterprising souls said St Bordeaux Victoria Road to Bear Ferrers on the same branch. But again, the train takes around 7 minutes and Google Maps said about 39. So I thought that was a bit...
Not quite.
Not quite. So jolly good effort, but no. Anyway, so we put all the correct or allowable answers into a hat and the winner is Alan Dunn. So well done, Alan. If you could drop us an email to quiz@greensignals.org, let us know where you would like your mug sending to. One little postscript to last week's quiz, Nigel. You asked where did the polarity change on the Welsh valleys, with the business about going up?
Up and down.
Yeah, up and down. And quite a lot of people helpfully said it's Cardiff Central. However, winner of the Most Detailed Knowledge of the Week award easily goes to Chris Hewlett, who wrote to us to say, although South Wales Valley's adopted up as uphill, the Taff Vale main line via Cardiff Queen Street connected to the GWR at Cardiff General, now Central, facing west. So no confusion. So the link from the Taff Vale extension to Penarth would entail a switch across between Penarth, Curve, North and East. Wow. Thank you, Chris. That is absolutely extraordinary knowledge.
The depth of knowledge across the interest is
amazing.
just staggering, isn't it?
It is. So to this week's quiz question, which is another listener question, and this time it comes from Mike Wright. This is a cracker. You'll love this one. Please could you name a location on the National Rail network where trains stop to pick up or drop off single line tokens, but there is no passing loop or indeed a set of points of any description, and the location is not a terminus?
Blimey.
It's an outstandingly good question, right? So we'll put that on our website. I'm not going to read that out again, take too long. But that's the question. We'll stick it on the website. If you think you know, you need to let us know by Saturday, the 14th of September at midday. Put all the correct answers in the digital hat, and then we'll select a winner at random to receive a very special Green Signals mug.
It is a particularly difficult one, Richard, which means it will take them all of 6 minutes or so, I'm sure, to get the right answer in. First,
I
right
fear you
one.
are correct.
We haven't stumped them. Well, you did stump them on one, didn't you? We didn't have a winner.
Yeah, track 44 and 61
right,
at Grand Central, yeah.
The Chattanooga choo-choo question. And a heartwarming story to end on. 2 members of Northern staff have been praised for finding a missing 8-year-old girl and reuniting her with her family. Hooray. James Waring and Abdi Shari were working at Blackburn Station last month when they spotted an unaccompanied child walking towards the ticket barriers. They asked her some questions and quickly became worried about her welfare, leading to them getting in touch with the police. Greater Manchester Police had launched a major search operation to locate her earlier in the day and sent officers to the station. A wonderful example of railway staff doing more than just checking tickets and showing initiative when something just doesn't look right.
Yeah, brilliant.
And
well
spotting
done.
a vulnerable person, in this case a little girl, and helping them get to safety. Imagine the joy in that family that night.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. Brilliant. Well done, James. Well done, Abdi.
And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. The buffer stop has approached us. Well, we've approached the buffer stop, so we have to stop. Thanks so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if that's where you are. And do join us again next week when we'll be back with more exciting video packages to share with you. We'll see you then. Until then, it's goodbye from me, and
it's goodbye from me.
Thanks for being here.